Can you hear me right now? I can't hear anything.
We can hear you.
I hear you, Molly.
I think everyone was just being quiet.
Gotcha. Well, I don't know. The problem is I don't know how to mute myself, so I'll just be very quiet while everyone's speaking.
I felt like the teacher walking into the room. I turned on my camera and got quiet.
We were all talking about you.
I heard you. Well, it's 2 o'clock. Let's get going. Good afternoon, everyone. This is John Neerman, and it's my pleasure to call this work session of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to order. Today is Thursday, October 22nd. The time is 2 p.m., and I'll begin with a roll call. Commissioner Lindley, how are you?
I'm here. Thank you very much.
Good. Commissioner Janeka.
Hey there. How are you doing?
Good to see you. So our commissioners are all present, and how about our general counsel? Ms. Smith, are you on the line?
I am. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. And Mr. McWhirter?
I'm here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So we have our Public Interest Counsel, Director Baker. Good afternoon.
Chairman?
Deputy Executive Director Stephanie, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. Good to see you. Well, today's work session is going to focus on diversity and inclusion within the agency. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Ms. Smith to call the item. Then I'll invite any opening comments from the commissioners. And we'll then hear the staff's presentation of the item. And colleagues, again, this is a work session, so please interject comments or questions anytime as we go. And with that, Ms. Smith, I'll ask you to please call item 1.
Item number 1 is the discussion of the agency's workforce and internship diversity and proposed activities to increase diversity.
Thank you. So, colleagues, I read ahead in the slide deck, so I can tell you that we're going to hear about how enhancing diversity leads to better performance in an organization. And that means we have an opportunity as an agency to do an even better job for the people of Texas. And we'll hear about metrics. We certainly need metrics to help us understand diversity, but this is about a lot more than a head count. It's about fostering a community that enjoys all the benefits of its diversity. And I'm proud of our diversity at TCEQ. I think our TCEQ family is a wonderful community, but on the issue of diversity and inclusion, although we do well, I think we can do better. And this is a garden that requires tending, and that's what today's work session is about. I also need to acknowledge that this conversation that we're having today is happening in the broader context of this year's national outcry over racial injustice. And that's made it plain to more people what has been clear to many people all along, and that is that this country hasn't transcended but still needs to heal from racial injustice. And I believe the efforts that we'll discuss today will help build our community at TCEQ. It'll help us achieve better organizational performance. It will enable us to better serve our fellow Texans. And I also hope that in some small measure, those efforts begin to answer the larger question and move us all toward greater justice. That said, all we're doing today is a little old work session, so no pressure, L'Oreal. I'm going to pause my comments there and invite any opening comments from my colleagues. Commissioner Lindley?
I think you've stated things very well, and I agree with everything you said. You know, it's just it's a difficult discussion at times, but it's a worthy discussion, and I just want to commend L'Oreal and Allison, other folks in the ED's office, a lot of folks in HR, all the people that work to gather the data for this. I know it's been a lot of work, and we just get to reap the benefits of all the work that's gone into it. But I appreciate all the work that's gone into diving into what this agency looks like when it comes to diversity. And, not to sound too cheesy, but I know a lot of heart's gone into it as well. And I think a lot of this stemmed from the heart as opposed to the head. But I'm glad we've merged the two. I'm glad it's the data is being presented, and that that we're going to really take a deep dive into this topic, because it's important for a lot of people. And I'm very proud of the leadership that's taken this issue head on, and look forward to today's discussion.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Janeka.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Lynn. I think I want to second both your remarks, but I just, in particular, want to really say thank you for that that opening statement. You think you put it really well. You captured it very well. It's a garden that needs to be tended. It's absolutely worth tending, and I'm very pleased we're having this discussion. I look forward to hearing more today.
Thank you for that. And Toby, at this point, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm really just going to sort of tell just a brief story about how we got here, and then I'm going to hand it off to L'Oreal, and she's going to then run through her presentation. Chairman, mirroring your comments, I think the reason why we're here, where it really started, was the death of George Floyd, and as you all know, it sparked a nationwide conversation about what was the right thing to do when everybody saw that video. And on a call with my executive team one day, we were sort of talking about it, and I sort of just put L'Oreal on the spot on the call and asked her a few questions, and some of her answers were frankly stunning. And I think that small little moment then led to a deeper conversation, which I think some in the agency know about. And then it led to the question of what were we supposed to do as an agency with this moment, with this nationwide conversation. What were we supposed to do with that? I've always prided myself on being a student of policy and history and law. Part of the context here is we're not that far from the civil rights movement, and I think that gets lost. That was not that long ago. And as I look at sort of the context there, look at the things that are important to me as far as like how we create policy. And then, you add the fact that you happen to be the leader of a large organization on top of all of that. You're like, okay, how do we react as an agency? Is it a statement? Is it taking part in a public event, which I think some public events led to some amazing things through this. Some led to some pretty disturbing things. And the conclusion that I think I came to is that the answer really starts at home, at the dinner table. It starts with conversations between family members, between friends, and then at our work home, that conversation needs to happen in the break room and with our colleagues. And, that conversation can be uncomfortable, and I think it forced me to go in and look at, I think, some of the biases that I was probably raised with. And my hope is that each individual at TCEQ took that moment, or has taken the last several months, and done that same deep dive into what they really believe, what their biases are, how they view a workspace, what it should look like, and all of those sorts of things. And then as leaders, we have the opportunity, L'Oreal, commissioners, the great thing is that as leaders of the agency, we actually have the opportunity to take a look at TCEQ as a whole, and then ask the question of how do we want to look, but then I think the more important question is why. And the thing that I keep coming back to at the end of this is I want to be able to answer the question of how do we organically build a culture that celebrates each individual who works here. I've never thought manufacturing an outcome is a good path or good plan. It doesn't feel authentic to me. And so I think the goal for me through this is authentic change that I think leads to a long-term culture change within TCEQ. And I want to mirror something. I think we have a good culture at TCEQ. We have a great family here. But it doesn't mean that it can't get better, and it can't get deeper, and it can't get richer. And so that's really the goal here. And I have to stop because this is really, L'Oreal, I have to thank L'Oreal. I want to make sure the public, I want commissioners, I want y'all to hear this, and I want the public to hear this. We would not be sitting here today would have not been for her ability to get real, to get vulnerable, to entertain and answer my questions, which frankly, some of them may have been slightly offensive. And I will say her willingness to challenge me. She asked me some tough questions and put me on the spot. And it was, I think it was through that I just, it led to this drive to want to do this. And I think that L'Oreal then took this and ran with it. And I think she's created what is an incredible, I think, path forward for the agency. And I think it will lead to that organic change that I'm aspiring to, and not a manufactured change. And I think that's very, very important. And so with that being said, publicly, thank you, L'Oreal, for your leadership on this. And I will stop, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Toby and commissioners. Good afternoon. I'm L'Oreal Stepney. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the agency. I'd also like to say good afternoon to Mary, our General Counsel, and Vic, our Public Interest Counsel, as well as my colleague, our other Deputy Executive Director, Romero Garcia. So thank you all. I don't know what to say. I really appreciate Toby's support, and I can tell you, Commissioner Janeka will testify. He was on the call when we had that conversation, and it was a random meeting, and just like anything, it really sparked a small fire that has led to us having this conversation. I've been at the agency almost 29 years, and this is the first time I've ever had a conversation about race at the agency. And I've been in different levels of management, and I've seen parts of the data before. So from me to all of you, thank you for allowing me the forum to talk about it and to look at our agency as a whole. I've received many, many emails from staff, and so I think they appreciate it as well. So for them and myself, I'm excited to have a conversation. And as Toby said, this is not an I got you moment. This is a discussion about where we are and how we can move forward. And Chairman, I completely agree with your analogy about it's like a garden, right? Diversity is something that you always have to work at, and you have to tend it, you have to water it, you have to foster growth. And so I'm very excited about the discussion, and I'm ready to go. So I think what I will do is I will go off screen and so I can flip through the slides. So you guys can still hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. But the slides won't move. Let's try something else.
Well, Bobby, aren't we the face of diversity up here?
I can't just capture my thoughts by looking at my expression. I don't know. This is...
Okay.
Well, that's why we're talking about it, right?
I might have to have Megan help me.
I can do that.
The slides won't move.
I'm not sure what's happening. They were moving a minute ago, so I'm sorry about that.
There are a few rare instances where you do see the limitations of a virtual working remotely from all over the state posture. I think if we were all in our agenda room, we'd feel a little more comfortable being able to see each other and interact. But I'm really pleased that we're still having this conversation, even in spite of the challenges on how to converse on it. So, yeah.
Okay, how about this? Can y'all see it? Did it move?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. All right, Murphy's Law. Let's get started. So,
hey, L'Oreal, let me interrupt you for just a second. It's not rendering quite correctly on my screen, which may be my problem. Bobby, how are you viewing it?
It looks like the second slide. I've got the PDF pulled up separately.
Okay. Well, it's a user error, so I'll correct it on my end. I think it's how I have my view set up and go to meetings. Let me propose this too, just to provide more screen space for people, and also that so people don't have to be staring at our faces through the whole presentation. I propose that we turn our cameras off, Bobby, and then L'Oreal, you can go ahead and I'll fix my own screen problem.
Thanks for that suggestion. We'll revisit if we want to talk.
Right.
And Commissioner Lindley, how's yours looking?
I can see it.
Okay.
So I'm good on my end. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the overall goal for this effort is to ensure a diverse and inclusive workforce and culture. And certainly diversity involves people of many different backgrounds in our workforce. And then inclusion means to open up the work culture so that, you know, all of our employees have an ability to thrive and participate. So this is the objective that when I started this project, I had in the back of my mind as we move through. So why are we discussing diversity, you know, and why is it important? So the reason for discussing diversity at this point is really, I think we all would agree that our employees are our greatest asset, and building an awareness of where we currently sit at our agency is very important, and that way we can move forward and modernize as we need to. And here on this slide, you will see some of the key reasons, just in summary form, for why, reasons for a diverse workforce and why it's beneficial. First, increased creativity, increased innovation, more lively discussions, decision-making, increasing in our talent pool. Certainly, there's advantages for teamwork and how teams work together, reducing biases, and we all have them. But certainly, heterogeneous teams help to reduce and dampen out some of those biases, and then reflect the communities that we serve. And I can speak personally to the importance of diversity. We've certainly seen that at the executive level. I say this all the time. Toby, myself, Romero, and Stephen, we all think differently. We come at problems from a different point of view, and it's really worked out where we, you know, 9 times out of 10 come up with a much better product. So, you know, we've experienced that in our own executive family, if you will. So here's a little bit of the research, and I want to say I really appreciate Allison Woodall, who's my special assistant, doing a lot of this research on the topic for me. It was very, very helpful. So, you know, there was an article in Harvard Business Review about the importance that diverse teams are more likely to constantly re-examine facts and remain objective. They tend to dampen out biases and question assumptions. And I think as a decision-making body, that's very, very important for our agency. Increasing capacity to serve. Diversity and inclusion helps an agency serve and protect people who have different backgrounds and experiences, and really is reflective of our state as a whole. Also, it increases the creativity. Creativity is a byproduct of capitalizing on differences. You know, businesses see this quite often, but I think it's also applicable to a state agency as ours. What they find is more innovation when you have a heterogeneous leadership. Ability to process facts more carefully. In this example, it's about a jury being able to look more closely at facts and have fewer errors when it's a heterogeneous panel. And that certainly is relevant for us because, again, we make decisions every day, whether it's permitting, enforcement, how to handle natural disasters, or handling a pandemic. And having all of those different viewpoints really only enhances our agency's ability to respond. And then finally, companies are more successful. Now, this example is really about, companies' bottom line, being profit-driven. And although our agency isn't profit-driven, we are service-driven. And I don't think that can be understated. We are a service-driven agency, and many times that involves production and being efficient, whether that's, permits or enforcement orders or compliance, handling complaints or invoices or purchases. So diverse teams help us overall render services much better. So when I just started this project, I think it might be the engineer in me. I wanted to diagram the process, and I call this a diversity map, but it really was important for me to kind of see the points in the process in which, we can influence diversity and key areas for us to investigate. Some people would call this an employee cycle map, when the employee enters the agency and ultimately when they leave the agency and the steps in between. So just quickly, the way I thought about looking at diversity from an agency standpoint, first on the front end, how do people discover our agency? That can be through our internship program, the Mickey Leland program, which is awesome. It can be through posting, recruiting, direct, express, or transition hires, and then we hire a lot of former contractors. And then certainly there's the hiring process would be the next step if once they become, aware of our agency and apply or through one of these other mechanisms. And then if they become employees, ultimately they'll take two paths, a staff contributor or a manager of some sort. Both paths are equally important to our agency's success. And so to start with, I started asking questions about the front end of the process. And I want to go into quite a bit of discussion about the Mickey Leland program, our internship program. So we've done a deep dive of that. Also, can we expand recruiting efforts to attract more minorities to the agency? So I'll talk about that as well. On the hiring process, as I mentioned before, we all have biases. Would it be beneficial for us to have unconscious bias training so that, the hiring supervisors, when they're looking at the pool of applicants, we try to reduce any of our biases that we do have. And then I can't speak enough about mentoring. I certainly was a product of that from people with many different backgrounds. And so as an employee, in order for a diverse group of employees, for example, to take the leadership path, it's really important for them to be mentored, even at the lowest level, from team leaders, section managers, and then directors. That's very, very important for all of our employees to, including minorities, to experience that. It's also important for them to be given challenging assignments and the ability to make mistakes and correct those mistakes, and that's how we learn. And so I wanted to focus on that as well. And the truth is, if you're never a team leader, then the likelihood of you becoming a director is very, very slim. And so those front-end steps are really, really important when we're talking about increasing diversity in our leadership. And then ultimately, I think we all can benefit from training with respect to biases. And so I'll talk about kind of our plans for that as we move through the slides. Now, the first slide, I've received a lot of questions about when I was talking to Toby and exec about our leadership. I wanted to look at the diversity of our leadership at the agency. And the first part of that is with gender. And as you can see, this slide really reflects the makeup of our agency with respect to gender. We have more female directors and more female team leaders. We have more male section managers than we have female section managers. And on the next slide, here are the percentages. And so it's fairly close. It won't be exactly 50-50, but it's fairly close. again, as you can see, there's 50% of our directors are female. And then it flips for managers. And then flips again for team leaders. And so I think from a gender standpoint, I think we're doing pretty good. So the next iteration is to look at ethnicity. And, you know, this chart, quite frankly, was fairly eye-opening for me. I was a little surprised at the makeup of our leadership team. And as you can see, the vast majority of the agency's leadership is white, and that includes directors, section managers, and team leaders. Now, let me say a little bit about the data for directors. This data includes those people who would be classified at the state level as a director, and so under our new titles, that would be assistant directors, and of course myself as the deputy executive director, and would also include Romero as a deputy executive director. So as you can see, let's take, for example, our Black employees. There are 5 directors, or that includes assistant directors, and 8 section managers and 15. And so this is an area I think that we can work as far as diversity of our leadership group. With respect to Hispanics, a little bit more, and then Asians, somewhat less. So again, our leadership team is really overwhelmingly, the vast majority are white. And so this made me ask why? Why does the data look like this? And I can talk to you about some of the things that we're going to do to try to answer that question.
Hey, L'Oreal, can I interrupt you for just a minute? And I wanted to ask about the goals, and not so much the qualitative goals, but just quantitative goals. What do we use as the benchmark or the goal? Is it do we reflect the population of the citizens of Texas? Is that sort of what we should be have an eye towards as we're asking the question about whether we're underrepresented in a particular area?
I think, Chairman, I don't have a great answer for leadership, what to compare it to. I think what I'll show on the next slide, couple of slides, where we compare our agency's workforce to the state labor workforce numbers. And so you'll see those numbers there. What I picked up from looking at the leadership numbers is just, it's really kind of overwhelmingly one way.
Yeah.
And ultimately, no matter what the numbers are, it shows me that there's an area that we can spend some time on.
Yeah.
And working towards, so.
Yeah, okay, appreciate that.
If I might jump in here with a follow-up on that point in question, and I appreciate you asking the question, Chairman. I think it was one that I asked myself when discussing this information, this subject in a previous briefing. I think I had exactly the same question about, okay, well, what are our goals we're measuring against? I think it's important to try to be thoughtful about that, because part of this discussion in this topical space always draws to those emotional, fearful reactions of people who may not necessarily be used to or open, and it's not an everyday thing. We jump back to the uncertainties, and so I think it's important, and it helps address some of the most extreme ways to characterize this self-analysis as unhelpful. And so in my mind, I think you can kind of be agnostic on what goals you're measuring against and just report the numbers and go from there. But in my view, I would see our agency is probably failing in its mission to recruit from all of Texas in a reasonably equal manner for whatever reasons. If we were below the demographics of the state or the region of where our workforce is being pulled from, and that would signal to me, okay, we can look at ways to improve, avenues to encourage more. So it is a very difficult question to answer. I appreciate that answer you gave, L'Oreal, and I think it's the right one. It's kind of up to beauty's in the eyes of the beholder and what you're judging it against, but I'm glad to see this data. So thanks.
Well, and I think moving forward, I think that's an important question. I didn't focus on, in this analysis, like a reference point. However, what I did focus on was process modifications that can influence the bottom line, if that makes any sense. So, and hopefully you'll see that as we go through. But I know Allison's on the line, and I think we'll take notes, and as we refine this over the next month and years, we can certainly look at that question in more detail. But the numbers from this next slide, you can actually see the percentages. 79% of the directors are white, 77% of the managers, and then the team leaders. And you can see how that compares to the other ethnic groups. And, we know that the demographics of the state are a lot different than that. And so, again, it made me ask why, and spending some time on that question. So I'll get to some of the things that we want to do as a process modification to help influence that some. Now, I also want to point out that, and I'll go back up, the team leader numbers, the blues, as you can see, we have a few higher numbers with the team leaders, and it's 67%. I'm sorry, 63% are white, and then so that leaves, 37% are for minorities. But so you can see there has been a little bit of an uptick for team leaders, which, and that led me to a recommendation for Toby. Most of our team leader positions are posted. In contrast, most of our director positions are appointed. And so that's one of the things that we would like to change, is open it up to many more people for the director slots, and providing access and opportunity in that spot. So that's certainly one of the key things that I wanted to bring to your attention, is there is some change at the team leader level. This isn't in the backup, but Toby had asked me about this question, and I thought this might come up, so I just went ahead and put it in there. How do we look historically from a leadership standpoint? And so really the numbers, really the graphs here, really just to show relativeness. Let's start with the team leaders. As you get, the gray is 2020, 2010 is the blue, so looking back over a span of 10 years. So as you can see, there are, as I mentioned before, there are more minority team leaders than what we've had in the past. It's still quite a bit of team leaders that are white, but we do see some increases there. On the manager level, it's kind of flat, to be honest. Looking at the black population's up, I think, by 2, Hispanic, Latino down by 1, so relatively flat. And then, of course, the directors, as you can see, for the black directors, it's been 5 for 10 years. And then Latinos down a little bit. And then it's been a significant increase for white directors. So, and I'll be happy to send this to your offices. Now, this chart compares gender compared to the state labor force. Basically, those are people who are available to work, looking for jobs. And so you can see for gender, again, this reflects the leadership of the agency as well. Over 50% of all of our offices are female. And then the remaining certainly are males. And so I think it reflects what we see in leadership, and I think we're pretty good with gender. And this is by office. This is for ethnicity compared by office. And you can see that, again, it kind of reflects what the leadership data shows, that some offices are more diverse than others, and certainly what we see in OAS, they have a fairly diverse office when compared to the other ones, as well as the state labor force. So that's a good. I think we might ask Kelly some of the things that OAS is doing and we can all learn and leverage some of their experiences for the rest of the agency.
L'Oreal, if I could take a moment on this previous slide and the one prior were two slides that I thought were really helpful to look at for one point that I've heard referenced anecdotally. I'm not sure that I've really seen where it's definitive and whether the data bear it out, but I think some professions tend to have more or fewer male and female and by ethnicity that have higher and lower percentages, relative percentages of the different minority populations. And I wonder if what we're seeing on the next slide, if you might bump over to this one, exactly, it seems that there's some differences there. You can see, for example, OAS, which is a kind of a more generalized discipline in general, if you're oversimplifying, but that doesn't necessarily pull from the same science-intensive, degree-specific kind of background or those disciplines. As an opposite example, OLS, a little larger percentage of OLS is made up of white, and I think the disproportionate share of attorneys in that office as compared to health, human resource and administration professionals in OAS. So I wonder how much our progress is hampered by factors outside of our control, where there's only so big of a pool of candidates that would fall into any of these categories in these respective areas that we pull from. But still, going back to that point you made at the beginning, this is always a garden worth tending. So it's just something you continue to reevaluate and work with.
Right. I completely agree with you, Commissioner. I think, we can look at the demographics of the different disciplines, legal, engineering, chemists, geologists. I mean, we can look at that, but I think the more relevant numbers to look at are the makeup of the applicant pool for those positions. And I know that's something that Parks and Wildlife does. They look at kind of the applicant pool and then from there who's hired, and then that can help us focus on, do we need to do more recruiting in certain areas, or is it our not necessarily our hiring process, but the interview process, either the interviewees or the hiring managers, or what is going on. And so we probably would have to do a little bit more deep dive into to figure that out. And also, Commissioner Janeka, one of the things that I've talked to HR about doing is looking at retention data, because I know that's something that you brought up to us previously, and how that breaks down by ethnicity and gender. And so that's something that I know is on Kelly's list to work through. And so we're just trying to figure out how to process that. So I hope does that answer your question?
It really does. It certainly, and thank you so much for your thoughts in response to that. I appreciate it, and I'm glad to hear. Thank you.
Bobby, if I could chime in here too, there are hurdles from, I was going to say elementary school, maybe even goes before elementary school, all the way through. You can identify, bottlenecks in the process or hurdles, and I know we're going to get into some of this more later, but part of this exercise is just identifying what the obstacles are and trying to address those. And, I think we've talked about measures going back all the way into elementary school, have field trips for kids just to open their eyes to the possibility of the work that they might do someday, show them all the cool things that we get to do here at the agency. And we've had similar challenges in and there's a lot of overlap with our historically underutilized business efforts. How do we get certified hubs to submit proposals to the agency? And there are a lot of hurdles to that as well. So anyway, I think you asked a good question, and it's really at the heart of this enterprise of how do we remove obstacles to improve on diversity.
Thank you, Chairman, for that. And we will talk about, and then Chairman, you brought this up to us as well. before you even get to the recruiting step, there's the kiddos in high school, for example, and exposing them to careers in the environment and STEM. And also, our agency has other careers that are important and that really help drive our processes, for example, financial careers. And so how do we reach out to those individuals? And so I partnered with ERD, External Relations Division, to put together a plan that looks at those things. And also where we recruit. And I'll just say this before we get to the recruiting slide. We've been reaching out to historically Black colleges and universities, also some other minority colleges, and I think that's great to do, but I'm a product of the University of Texas at Austin, and so we've reached out to them as well. So there's pockets of minorities that are in these disciplines in all of the universities, and so where we can get the biggest bang for our buck, we're trying to do a little bit of everything. But I'll have more on that as we go through. And so I do think it's important for us, for all of the data, I think it's important for me to say, the first step is awareness of where we sit. That's the very first step, and I think that's the most important step. And then from there, we can make changes and, as I say, do deep dives and analyze what's going on. So I put together a plan, and this is just really to get us started, to be honest. It's to get us started, and, over the next year and subsequent years, we'll change, modify, learn from. So the first thing we did, like Toby mentioned, our conversation, and then analyzing the diversity data. And I've just shown you a few of the slides. There's a lot more data that we're analyzing, but it's a start. And then what we'd like to do is to develop diversity, inclusion, and unconscious bias training. And HR will hire a contractor to develop the training. What we're looking at is incorporating pieces of that into our hiring training, our EEO, and our performance management training sessions, because honestly, that's where the rubber hits the road. And HR is already looking into that. We also had a conversation with we've had conversations with, I'll call them vendors, just generic terms, about what are some good unconscious bias trainings for our agency. Ultimately, we would like to train our executive team first, then managers, and then all of staff, and then make it and have it be on a 2-year training schedule, just as if we were to do, security training for our passwords or other types of training where we take it every couple of years. What we do want is a really good training program that meets our needs. And so I think we're at the executive level, we want to kind of test drive it first. But I just wanted to assure you guys that we're already working on that. I also created a Mickey Leland intern focus group, and there's a lot of slides on the Mickey Leland program coming up. So I'll talk about that. What we'd like to do is have quarterly metrics, and we're working with OAS to put together, and the vision is like a 1 or 2 page report for the divisions, showing key things, diversity for your leadership staff or your staffing patterns, and we can also add other metrics to those lists. We just want to see what works best. And looking at some of the other agencies, they actually have real-time dashboards with a lot of this information and more. So we want to pick out key things. And again, it goes back to making sure that we have awareness and data, front and center. Is not on the internet where you click on it once in a while. It's fine for it to be on the internet, on our internal pages, but having a report come to you, it makes it more front and center. And then benchmarking. We spent, and I have to again give a thanks to Allison for helping me with this. We spent quite a bit of time talking to other agencies, a few corporations, so that we can, learn what they've done. If they've already invented the wheel and it works, so why would we want to reinvent it? So we spent quite a bit of time talking with them. Recruiting. So, I had this idea about recruiting, for example, at HBCUs. Looking at the ones that have environmental science programs, those students are ripe for interest in our agency. And, we've already started, reaching out. Our staff has already reached out to a number of them to develop relationships, because that's another thing, right? Having one-on-one relationships with those career center staff at those universities, at any university, is really, really key. The other thing that we've done is we've tried to take advantage of the virtual space that we're in right now. So matching some of those schools up with who's also having a virtual career fair or information sessions. We've actually started visiting with those schools already. So I really appreciate Beth West, Kelly Cameron, Kelly Keel, Lyndon, Michelle Rockland of our HR department, because I think that's really, really positive. Some of the other agencies use subscription services, and some are very expensive, and they basically disseminate your job posting or intern posting to minority organizations or other colleges. But the one that we found that is free and that most all universities use is Handshake. And we started posting our internship applications up there, our job applications for regular employment, and we think that's a great tool that we've started to use. And then we plan to reach out to professional organizations. You know, we've already, to some of the local chapters, we've reached out to National Society of Black Engineers. We've reached out to the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. We've reached out to some of the accounting associations. So that's going to be another big push for us. And just like anything, some of the fruit will bear out and some of it won't, but we're going to reach out and try something different, and so that we can hone in on what works best. Another new cool thing I know we're very excited about, Toby's idea. I wanted to come up with a focus group for diversity, and then Toby had this great idea about having coffee with exec. And the concept was we would have, I guess we'll do it over Teams, a virtual meeting now just to talk about a topic. And this first set of topics will be about diversity. So the first one is, what are we doing well and what are we missing? And, you know, this is our version of a focus group. So our first one we have planned for next week on October 28th at 9 o'clock. We may have to move it to the following week if there's some technical issues, but right now it's October 28th. We should be sending out an email to everyone, to the agency, to letting them know about it tomorrow. And what we're going to do is the first 10 people who sign up, we're going to have the meeting with, and then we're going to keep a running list. And then we'll have subsequent meetings to talk to the other group. But we want to keep it small. Number one, there's some, inviting 250 people, we might have, or more, we might have some technical difficulties. But more importantly, we really want an interactive discussion with the exec and also staff. So this is the next step in the conversation. We want to hear directly from our employees. And so anyone who's interested in joining the discussion, please, reply to the email that's in the email. There will be a special email designated. And so I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about hearing directly from our great employees. And it's going to be casual, so look for the email tomorrow. The next thing we want to do is back on our leadership, the numbers, and kind of an idea that we have that we plan to implement is, as I mentioned, we post most all of our team leader positions, but for directors, we really appoint. I've done it always. I've done it by appointment or posting, but most of the time it's by appointment, even if it's, talking to people first. And so what we would like to do is to post all of our team leaders, section managers, directors, and also senior leadership positions, for example, like an assistant director, and post those internally. And what our hope is that it gives access and opportunity to everyone. It also gives people the hope that they can one day, apply for one of these jobs and maybe become one of these managers. And so that, that's from a diversity standpoint. But from a cross-training standpoint, it opens it up for people across the agency to, maybe move from air to water or water to waste or to the field or the field to waste permits or something like that. And so it just really opens up the conversation. And I can tell you, personally speaking, whenever I've posted positions, I've always been surprised. I learned that, who might be interested in that level of work. I also, gain new ideas, and it's just a real positive experience. And so that's something that we would like to do. And we've already had a couple of our divisions that are posting like the assistant director positions. So you'll see more of that. And then finally on this slide, developing a diversity mentoring program. I don't know if Commissioner Lindley remembers, but she and I were on a panel discussion about mentoring for the Emerging Leaders Program. And so that gave me an idea about, developing one for the agency. Certainly, mentoring at the lowest level is probably the most effective, either from a senior technical person or your managers in the divisions. But, if there is a way where, the concept would be we get volunteer mentors. If someone wants to send an email for a 20-minute chat about career development or lessons learned or how to be successful at the agency or, in the work environment, we'd be happy to have that conversation. Kind of similar to what we have for Enviro mentors. And so we're working on that as well. And of course, everyone's welcome to participate, and then minorities are strongly encouraged. And the next slide is, and Chairman, thank you for your idea about reaching beyond our recruiting efforts, kind of reaching back into the process is the wrong word, but reaching back into the schools, basically, before kids are even thinking about, where they want to ultimately be in life. So first, let me say a big thank you to our External Relations Division, Ryan, Dana, Brooke, and Allison, and then the other Allison, for their hard work. They took a simple conversation that we had with a few ideas, and they completely ran with it. I'm so excited about it. They put together a plan using our Take Care of Texas outreach efforts and the plan is a series of videos to reach minority students. And I think what we'll do is we'll have videos that really talk about STEM, the importance of STEM, either like, for example, a chemist or an engineer, geologist, environmental investigators, meteorologists, that sort of thing. And also pair it with some of the activities of our agency. And then at the end, have our staff come online and answer questions and just talk more about it. And so we're hoping to deploy that for Black History Month in February 2021. So it's really incorporating kind of the virtual field trip concept. So we're real excited about it, and I just applaud their efforts on that. One thing that's important, they did some research actually to find out the target audience, and what we've learned is middle schoolers is where they start seeing themselves in STEM. That's where it really begins. And so starting with the middle school and then secondary schools after that. And I think the research shows that to reach underrepresented youth, looking at Title I schools, and so they have a list of those. We're going to start with some of the larger communities like Dallas, Houston, and so on and so forth, because those school districts have large minority populations, and so we're hoping to develop real good partnerships with those local ISDs. We've already reached out to Dallas ISD. They have actually an environmental center where they do virtual field trips every week over many, many months, and so we're going to partner with them as well. Toby had the idea of an alumni making an appearance, so he's going to send Romero and I back to high school to talk about what we do, so that should be good. And then having diverse presenters. So the objectives of the video series are to just encourage students to pursue STEM and also the various roles of our agency. And also to promote the personal belief in one's ability to succeed in STEM. And I think that's really, really important for the students to believe that, math is hard, chemistry is hard, but, perseverance, you can succeed if that's something that you're really interested in doing. And then increase diversity within the environmental fields as a whole. And so more of a community service, not just our agency, but, serving the entire environmental community, if you will. We're going to feature scientists and chemists and folks at our agencies. Brooke was telling me that it's very important for us to be upbeat so that the kids can be interested. So we'll try to make sure we show some cool pictures and videos for the schools and engage them so that they can envision themselves doing what we do. Future ideas, things that probably post-COVID, cultural fairs. Also, some of the other agencies that we benchmarked, they highlighted employees during different heritage months. Maybe even High School Day at the agency, where high schoolers come into our regional offices in Austin and just see what we do. Maybe even creating a manager focus group on diversity. And then finally, do we need a plan of some sort, maybe not lengthy, that helps ensure sustainability of our activities and efforts. Real quickly, I'll just share with you some of the things that we learned from other agencies. And, I do want to say thank you to Michael Bryant at TxDOT, David Buggs at Parks, and then Kelly Sauls at TRS. They were extremely helpful and spent a fair amount of time with Allison and myself. So thank you to all of you. We did look at other state agencies, but these are just three that we wanted to point out. We also looked at some corporations, and but these have more extensive programs, so we thought we'd talk about those. TxDOT has an affirmative action program, but that's federally required. But they have a lot of their diversity measures within that plan. They have a civil rights division. They have a diversity officer. They have high school and college internships as well as co-op programs. This is the dashboard I was referring to. They have quite a bit of information on their dashboards. They have employee groups like women groups, and a lot of that was started from the staff themselves. And then they post positions, including their intern positions. So they have probably 500 intern positions every year. Texas Parks and Wildlife, they have a diversity officer. They have a diversity and inclusion plan, internship programs as well. They have a mentoring program with something unique that they do is they do personality profiles to try to match the mentee with the correct mentor. They also have partnered with, universities like Houston-Tillotson and TSU as Prairie View, Sul Ross. And, they've really partnered with them on curriculum, trying to have some of their curriculum tailored towards the needs of their agency. So maybe some of the students will fare better through the interviewing process, if you will. And of course, they have specialized programs like wildlife capturing. All their positions are posted. They have a concept of SMART goals, and it's not numbers. It's not number based. It's more of I'll say qualitative things. Like, for example, one may be a goal may be to enhance understanding of diversity and inclusion issues. Another one may be promotional materials have ensuring that those have broad appeal, or ADA accessibility of their web pages, develop effective recruitment strategies. So those types of things, and they aren't the same for every employee. I guess the manager chooses what's best depending on the job, basically. They share subscription information with us, and we've shared that with HR. And then they also have a Employee Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee. So they have that. And then they do monthly cultural highlights, and it's really tied to their mission. For example, women in conservation or African-American birders, that sort of thing. And then the teacher's retirement system. Similar, diversity officer, they really try to leverage their leadership program. educate the agency under recruiting. I think, and they've done some training at the executive level. They did an equity audit. They also have a diversity council. I think what's something that that they try to emphasize is celebrating diversity and celebrating a culture of inclusion. And I think that goes back to what Toby said about, you know, having an organic nature to diversity and inclusion, making it, you know, less prescribed, but, you know, kind of organically making modifications and making sure that everyone feels included. And they've done video stories for some of their individuals. Any questions before I move on to the Mickey Leland program?
L'Oreal, that's really outstanding, and a lot of work. I can see a lot of work went into that. I don't have any questions, but that's looking good. Colleagues, any questions?
No, I completely agree with everything you said.
No questions here. I'm hanging with.
All right, looking good.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So the next up is our Mickey Leland program. This is an area which we did a deep dive, and I'll go over some of the things that we learned. But first, let me say how outstanding that we have 30 years of the Mickey Leland program, celebrating Congressman Mickey Leland and his work for the environment. And so we're just so proud of the program, and we're excited about all of the alumni and new students to come into the program. Several of the alumni are now part of the agency's executive leadership team, so we're excited about that. And also our board, you know, the Mickey Leland board has members from academia, from consulting, from industry, from former interns, just a wide range of people. And I can tell you from sitting on the board for many years, they're all very committed to the mission of the program and helping to make the program successful. So I really appreciate them. And so this is just this slide here celebrates the program. And also, if you notice at the bottom, there's a link for anyone who's interested in being a sponsor for an intern. And if someone listening in is interested in being a sponsor, they can certainly email me and I will point them in the right direction for Juanita Baldwin, but who will work with them directly. So it's a great program. So our focus group, here are all the great folks who have literally been meeting with me weekly for the last several months to talk about the Mickey Leland program. So I appreciate all of their comments and feedback, and then certainly their patience. But we created the focus group to look at the entire process, including diversity numbers, applications, how we move paper through the agency, our decision making, our training, and many other elements. Here is the mission statement for the Mickey Leland program. It's to heighten the awareness and encourage the participation of minorities, women, and economically disadvantaged college students regarding environmental-related issues and policies. Also to develop a diversified workforce within Texas for environmental agencies and others. And then finally, to train and equip students as environmental professionals and future leaders. And so one of the things that we're going to do as far as training is we're going to kind of reemphasize the mission statement as we're training our mentors and our hiring managers and kind of have that more front and center than we have. So here's the data. This is 5 years worth of data, ethnicity data. And as you can see, the trend is over the years, probably 47 to 57% of the interns have been white. This year, that's 74%, so dramatically different. Certainly, this was, you know, the year of COVID, and we didn't have as many interns this year. I think it was around 61, so approximately half of what we would normally have. And when we started this process, we didn't really even think we would have a summer program because of COVID. And so we appreciate Toby's support to actually have the program, and also the external sponsors who sponsored interns. So with that being said, you know, I do think, you know, this certainly was our least diverse year that we've seen. But if you look at the numbers, you know, putting COVID aside, most of the interns that we have are white. And, you know, for example, with African Americans, the numbers have just been low. And I know I personally have gone to like HT, Prairie View, St. Ed's, UT's EEO program to inform the administration as well as the students about Mickey Leland. And so I was, looking at the data, I started to ask why, we are recruiting, so what is going on? As you can see for Hispanics, the numbers are a little bit better. And although this year was not so much, and then Asians, this year was certainly a lower year than compared to the other ones. So there's some work that we can do. So there's just opportunities. And no matter what the numbers are, as we said earlier, we can always work to strive to do a better job. So, and here's just a breakdown of the numbers. This year we hired 2 Black, 12 Hispanic, 2 Asians, and 45 white students. So now we start to look at the why. And this is some of the investigation that we did. We received 525 applications. 115 of those were not complete. 410 were complete, but only 311 were forwarded. And so we started to ask, well, why? Why weren't they complete? And also why were some forwarded and others weren't? And so on the completion side, what we learned is a good portion of them are just filling out the application, but they're not completing the rest of the attachments. So, for example, you need a transcript, you need a letter of recommendation, you need an essay. Another component of that is some people do all of those things except they may not have a professor's recommendation. So we'll talk about that a little later as a way to address some of that. And then also, if you look at, like, for example, the Blacks and Asians, 41 received, 29 forwarded, 34 forwarded. So, I was wondering, what's the difference? Or also with the rest of them as well. For example, 167 whites were forwarded. So why is there a difference? And HR screens the applications based on location, if someone if the sponsor is looking for an undergraduate student or graduate student, and then of course the majors. But certainly the location and the majors are really key to that decision process, and also were those applications complete. So 2020 data, 74% of the students were white, 3% Black, 3% Asian. You can see what stood out for me is there were 41 complete applications for Black students and 47 for Asian, but we only hired 2. The program only hired 2. A larger proportion for Hispanic students. And so, this came up in the Mickey Leland board meeting. Someone was saying, well, L'Oreal, we need to recruit more. We need to go to these different places, have more minorities in the applicant pool. And someone else jumped in and said, well, nearly 50% of your applicants are minorities. And so it's not like you're not getting applications. And we hired 26% total. And so, that was a great observation. So that meant that we need to look a little bit further. And so once we looked a little bit further in 2020, as an example, 44% of our interns were pre-selected and hired, which reduces the actual positions that are available. So that was about 27 of the 61 spots that we had. So what that means is 27 of those spots had already been taken up. So they really weren't available for a competitive process or interviewing process to be filled by any intern, minority or not. And so what we are planning to do is just to discontinue that process. Everybody comes in, even slate, and we'll take them through the interviewing process and see what shakes out. But I was just really surprised that, we had shrunk the available spots through this process. And the pre-selections included like former interns or also people who just asked for a certain intern application. And so that's what that includes. So we're going to eliminate that and, make sure it's accessible and opportunities for all that apply.
L'Oreal, could I ask gently about that decision and see if you think there may be any value in having an escape valve for instances where that pre-selection has a very good reason that, the previous interns, if it's continuing to work on a project, I could see some strong arguments that may be a programmatic issue that's worth raising the flag on, that it would be unfortunate to have a baby thrown out with the bathwater kind of scenario. But I agree with you, and I think I see very, very much the need to switch off that avenue. So I'm very sensitive to the concern raised. I'm curious if you think maybe having, DED sign off or somebody up the management chain, where if you know that you've got to make the argument to your boss or your boss's boss that, hey, I really do want to go out and get that one intern, that might naturally help address some of the pre-selections that don't have a great argument or an explanation behind them. But I appreciate y'all raising this flag. I think this is a great deep dive to get to the actual switches that would really meaningfully move the needle, rather than just continuing to throw up your hands. Well, let's do more outreach. So thank you.
Well, I think that's a really good question. And so a few things. The former interns would not be excluded from the program. They would just be in the same pool as everyone else. And certainly in their interview, they can talk about their previous experience, which may or, could give them an advantage, at least one piece of an advantage. Secondly, for former interns, I understand a program area had someone good last year, and it's like, hey, let's have that person back, and there may be some benefits to that, and I guess that's something that we can consider. Toby said something that kind of resonated with me. He said, we want the agency to be exposed to as many interns as possible, and having that experience as possible, as many of them as possible. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why we were saying, we're going to take that box off of the application. And again, the former interns, their application will be put in the mix. But if that's something that we need to rethink, we're happy to do it.
I appreciate that answer. I think you've given it a lot of thought, and I'm not concerned that it would be a problem. Appreciate your response.
Thank you. And I appreciate the discussions, because these are really hard questions. So, or concepts, I guess, that we're doing. And at the end, I think at the end of the year, and I think I have a slide at the end, we're gonna evaluate, and I think that's important, to evaluate the changes that are being made and see if they make sense, and survey people and see if we need to make more changes, and go back if we need to. So. For training for the interns, something that was brought up was it might be beneficial for some of the interns to have interview skills training. And so for the candidates, so our plan was to just point them, all interns, to a website or with a video or a brochure or something that kind of helps them with interview skills. They can take advantage of it or not, but we were planning to do that with anyone who was applying. Also, we normally have training for mentors about this is the program and everything. And so what we'd like to do is also have some unconscious bias as a part of that training program, along with, including the mission of the program and emphasis on, these are pre-entry level positions. A lot of times, most of them are juniors in college. And so we want them to absolutely come to work for us during the summer and contribute. And we want to learn from them, and we want them to learn from us. But anytime you come into the agency, there's training, even if you're a full-time employee. And so nobody comes in with, everything. We're lucky if they do. And so we have to remind, some of the mentors and supervisors that these are pre-entry level positions. We want them to get exposed to the agency. So that's something else we'll emphasize. And again, evaluate the progress. On the next page, something else we looked at, we're completely revamping the forms. I talked about removing the candidate preferences questions from the forms. Also, our HR department did benchmark other agencies like Parks, Railroad, Texas instance, Texas Parks and Wildlife, but also the Water Development Board and TxDOT. And, you know, these are temporary positions, and so we're going to start taking an unofficial transcript. We have only been taking official transcripts, and as I understand, the difference is students can just download them versus, you know, it being sent from the registrar's office. So that should reduce expense for them, and it provides some flexibility, and hopefully it gets at some of those incomplete applications. We're going to something we learned from this year, and I think it's something we want to keep, and we're going to add a couple of boxes for that. So, you know, when we thought we weren't going to have a program, a lot of our regional areas that would normally have a lot of interns weren't able to have a program because of COVID. And so some of the locations checked on the box were for Austin, and so those folks were kind of in the mix for internships. But what we found this year is we did most of them remotely, virtually. And so I think some supervisors really are open to that. I know we did a survey of some of the hiring supervisors, and a lot of them are open to continuing that concept. First of all, it's a space saver in areas of the agency where we have quite a number of people. And then they just thought it was beneficial. So we're going to add that to the application to see if people are open to working virtually. And then right now the application has 3 spots. So I could say, you know, I have a preference to work in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, or Midland. And, but, you know, we do find that some interns, even if, you know, for the possibility of the experience, would be willing to work at any of our work locations. And so we're going to have a box with that on it as well. And then finally, something we're going to do is we're going to allow other options for the recommendation letters, because sometimes it's difficult to get a professor, you know, to get a professor to actually do the recommendation letter. So we're going to allow, you know, like a teaching assistant, which has been done in the past, an employer recommendation, volunteer organization. So we're going to kind of expand that a little bit. And then kind of in our parking lot list is, you know, we've been, actually Donna White has done some research on micro internships, and where basically if a hiring manager doesn't have like a full summer's worth of work, but they do have a project. And so, you know, that might be something that we explore as well. So just trying to stay on the forefront of what's going on out there in the college world. A couple more slides. So the other thing we thought about doing was and we'd like to pilot this, is to have a diverse panel of interviewers for interviewing interns. And so we'd like to pilot it with a few regions and a few offices. You know, some have already volunteered, actually. Our focus team, Juanita Baldwin, has developed a draft set of core questions for our group to consider and debate over. And these questions are really focused on, you know, more soft skills and getting developing a rapport with the intern candidate, and interpersonal skills, because, you know, we can train people to do a lot of things, and then certainly there will be a few questions that are job specific, but we wanted to make that available to the hiring managers. And then we want the panels, as I mentioned, to be a diverse panel of hiring managers, and maybe even using some of the emerging leaders as a possibility on those panels, because that serves 2 purposes. That gives them experience, and then it also hopefully helps diversify the panel. And I talked about recruitment. We're doing the same thing with the internship program that we're doing with regular employees. Our recruiters talk about both when they go out to those universities. We have already, as an example, Kelly Cameron visited with the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers at an event at Texas Tech, and 50 students attended. So that was really, really positive. About 30 attended a similar event at UT Rio Grande Valley. And of course, our recruitment activities also include schools like Baylor, or we're also looking at some of the chambers of commerce. And so quite a bit going on the recruitment front. just a couple more slides. This year, we've been talking about diversity as a part of the board, but this year, some of the board members and I did just a simple question like we're asking the agency. It was about what is the importance of diversity in the workplace, and so we had a panel discussion about that for our interns this past summer. So that went really well. I've had interns ask me about the agency's diversity and inclusion programs, actually request a meeting with me just to ask about that because that was important to them. And then finally, the board is constantly engaged with Juanita on recruiting additional sponsors for the program because having more external sponsors really enhances our ability to fill those slots with interns. And then at the end, we'll do an annual evaluation, keep what works well and modify what doesn't. And so I think that's important for us to do a look back over the year and, see what worked and what didn't. And I think that's really it. I'm open to questions.
L'Oreal, I think I asked my questions as we went along there. Commissioner Lindley, thoughts or questions at this point?
I don't have any questions. My only thoughts are not really anything impressive or all that inspiring. But first, let me say that I'm in and up for coffee whenever those get going. And secondly, one thing, and I feel like this is maybe not where y'all started, but I know that this was part of the conversation at some point, probably pretty early on. And then I think your presentation shows that y'all kept this in the back of your mind the whole time, and I really, really like it. But I feel like probably everyone, but I'll speak just for myself, have heard a lot over the past few months is that whether they're kids or adults, people have said, I never saw someone with my skin color doing the job I wanted to do, right? And I've just heard that a lot. And so I feel like y'all have done a really good job of looking at the question of, so what can the TCEQ do to provide those opportunities for younger folks, right? To show them, regardless of their skin color, they can have the job they want. And I love that we're getting involved with college kids, and I love that we're looking at ways to tap into kids younger than that. And I'm just, I'm really impressed with that. I'm excited about it. I would hope that y'all would, as Bobby already pointed out, between three of us, there's not a whole lot of diversity as far as skin color goes, but however we can help, I would hope that y'all would not be shy about asking us, hey, it'd be really great if you participate in this way or if you did whatever, because I think we all be willing to do whatever we need to do. But I love everything you've presented. I love the mind frame the agency seems to be in right now, and I'm very impressed with the presentation. So let us know what we need to do on our part, because I know we all three, want to participate and contribute in a meaningful way as well.
Thank you, Commissioner, and we'll definitely, that's really a great idea, inviting you guys to coffee, and we'll maybe put you guys in rotation.
Count me in.
Okay.
Commissioner
I'll assume all three.
Yes, absolutely. I want to make sure, Commissioner Lilly,
I'm done. I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Thanks for that. And I wanted to grab on a couple of breadcrumbs that you dropped that were just too tantalizing for me to leave alone. And the micro internships, that's an interesting concept and one I'm ever so intrigued by, and I would love to see and encourage the board of the Mickey Leland program to consider where that could help drive us into completely unexpected new directions. I think there's real tremendous value in the Mickey Leland experience of having it be that summer internship. There's a summer cohort. In previous years, when we've had a more normal summer experience, it really, I think, is a valuable and important thing for, when I was a sponsor, the first time I was a Mickey Leland sponsor myself, getting to hear, interacting with the intern I was working with that summer, after she would go to those conferences and work with other interns, I thought it was such a wonderful experience. But using that summer cohort experience as our only real meaningful opportunity for internships from the public, I feel like we've been a little hampered in the past, where I felt other agencies had spring and fall opportunities. Legislative session is always so lively. Where can we get good bodies and brains helping us out in these growing fires and expanded efforts that we're all having to get sucked into at other times of the year, not just in summer. So the micro internship avenue may be an interesting checkbox that y'all look at, and suddenly there's some pathways where you can grab interns in the fall and spring, and maybe you bring them back in the summer and give them the opportunity to come participate in these events if they want to travel in person or do it virtually. Or a lot of great unintended benefits from this self-evaluation and this inquiry that y'all done that I'm intrigued about already. So I really couldn't be more pleased with what y'all have been looking at and evaluating, and the effort that you put into it is tremendous. The other point I just wanted to respond to and reflect on, the efforts you're considering and laying out in terms of addressing outreach to the youngest Texans, our elementary school and middle age school and high school kids. I think that's such a great added effort and new way to look at it. I'm glad, Chairman, that you raised that issue, but it struck me what a wonderful opportunity we have as a state, or as an agency. We're working actively every day to help guard, safeguard, and improve, in most cases, the air, water, and land of our state. Well, we get to work on one other important media as well, the human capital of our country and state. And so that's a real outstanding way that we are using our resources and capital and efforts to very selfishly try to get good future recruits for us. But there's that added benefit of it helps drive diversity into this environmental science world that may be, like so many other subchapters of the STEM workforce, just one that progress has been slower than we would like in terms of having greater and more diverse and meaningful participation from all walks of life. So I'm really pleased and just happy to continue to hear from y'all on this topic. So thank you so much.
Well, thank all of you, and certainly we'll have coffee or tea. And Commissioner Janeka, so, I just have to really applaud Donna for bringing this to our attention, and we're going to find a way. We're not going to wait. We're going to do it this year. And so I think you have some really good points, because looking at the other agencies, they do have kind of that co-op concept, work a semester and then back at school. And I'm not saying that that's what we need to do, but they do have that concept of doing kind of fall and spring as well. And so if we can pair the micro intern concept for a project with being remote and virtual, so the students can go back to school, but maybe they can also still be an intern. And so I do see that has huge advantages that, we should take advantage of what we're learning through our new virtual world. So I think that's great. And then also, I tell you, I'm sure Brooke and Dana would tell you, and Ryan, that I was literally jumping up and down in my office because I was so excited about the plan that they put together. And I think it's just going to have such a positive influence on our agency, as well as, just serving the community. Whether those students ultimately work for us or not, we're still providing a service to the community. And I think that's really important. So, and thank you guys for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, let me offer just a few thoughts as we're winding down here. Commissioner Lindley, I want to play off something you said, appealing to, diverse students, getting them to imagine themselves in roles and positions, just sort of building on that. What I would want to tell young people is we have real challenges to solve, and we need you. We need scientists. We need engineers. We need people with that STEM expertise. And if those people come from a more diverse community, we'll be able to serve the people of Texas even better. We'll be able to solve those problems in a better way. Pointing back to all the benefits of diversity that you outlined in the first few slides of the presentation, L'Oreal. I don't know if young people will really respond to that message, that we need you, but we do. We need them. So also, clearly there's a tremendous amount of, as I said, a tremendous amount of work and effort and thought and good thought that went into this presentation. And so I'm really excited about all the activities that you've outlined, L'Oreal, and I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank everybody else, and I'll try to name a few at the risk of leaving people out, but the Mickey Leland Board, the Mickey Leland Diversity Focus Group, especially Allison, Juanita, Ramiro, I think you had a hand in some of this. Toby, thank you for helping initiate the conversation. I'm really excited about this project. So I think I'll leave my comments there. And Toby, I want to, well, L'Oreal, let me begin with you. Ask L'Oreal if she has any sort of closing thoughts, and then Toby, give you an opportunity to offer any closing thoughts as well.
Well, Chairman, Commissioners, I'm just so thrilled that I work at an agency that can have this conversation in a public forum, and we're open to change and embracing change, and we're listening to our employees, and I'm just very excited about. I'm also excited about the teamwork that I've experienced, either in the focus groups or working with the other parts of the agency, such as ERD and HR. And so everybody came to the table wanting to help me and to embrace some of my wacky concepts. And so I just wanted to say thank you to all of them. And thank you to Toby. Toby is so great. Sometimes he pushes me out of my comfort zone, which I appreciate, particularly in talking about race and diversity. And so I just want to thank him for his leadership and all of you for your leadership. So thank you.
Hey, Chairman, I'll jump in. I'm just excited that it's being launched today. I think that L'Oreal's kind of systems approach actually, in a weird way, worked really well for this. Her engineering background, I think, allowed her to take it apart in a way that not everyone, I think, could have done. And so I think it was very illuminating, and I think, like I said, puts us on the right path. We will keep you up to date as the different parts start to come together. We start moving some of these things forward, and we'll be tracking, the data closely, so we can, try to keep real-time numbers on what does it mean for the agency. Are we seeing changes, and we'll be getting that to you. The last thing I'll end with is just a reminder back to all of the employees that Coffee with Exec, you have to sign up for it. So if you're out there and you would like to be part of the discussion, albeit probably virtually for the time being, hopefully eventually we'll be able to do it actually, in person and host it, up in the executive office. But I don't think we can do that quite yet. But you need to go sign up for that. So please, if you would like to take part, sign up. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Toby and L'Oreal. I forgot one more thank you. As we were sort of having this broader conversation within the agency over the summer, I too heard from quite a few employees, and I want to thank them for sharing their thoughts and their stories with me also. This isn't a project of a few focus groups and advisory boards. This is really project and an enterprise for everyone in the agency to engage with. So I thank them for sharing their time with me, and I encourage everyone in the agency to engage on this effort. And with that, let's call a close to item 1. The only other thing on our agenda today was executive session. We will not be meeting in executive session. So with that, the time is 3:33 p.m. and we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Once again, you have a good week. Good day.
Thank you.